Welcome to another episode of the Hospitality Mentor Podcast. And today we have an exciting one. We've got Nico Foris, CEO of Guest Services Inc. Nico, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. Great to be with you today. Very exciting.
Yes, look, you've got a unique background, and I was excited to talk to you about this because a lot of people we meet, they know they want to be in hospitality right from the beginning, and I want to get into your career. But did you have a hospitality job? What was the first one before you got into guest services?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to take you back to my primitive roots. I started in hospitality at 12 and a half years old. My first job at that time was a dishwasher in an upscale steak restaurant in Maryland. And I got to tell you, it was the best time of my life. I worked hard, made some great relationships and friends, and worked my way up to being a busboy. Uh, and the economics were pretty good as a young teenager in high school. And so that's really the foundation of my grassroots of hospitality before I moved on, and I went to Penn State University,
Yep.
and then took a little bit of a different path after that.
Well, let's get back to 12 and a half years old. We're definitely breaking some labor laws at this point. Was it family owned restaurant? Was it a friend?
Well, I'll tell you, Steve, nobody questioned some of the labor laws at 12 and a half, but growing up in a small town,
Mhm.
it wasn't a family owned business, relatively small town that had a restaurant. And it was one of those things where, when your friends are, following suit, you work hard, play hard at the time. It just was something that kind of, created a circle of friendships, and a popular thing to do. But I'll tell you, dishwashing is a lot of people can appreciate tough job. And then when you add the steak restaurants to it with the grizzle and
Oh,
everything,
man.
but you never thought twice about it. It was just something you did and you enjoyed it. You ate good for sure and you made some friendships along the way. But yeah, it just yeah, nobody questioned the $3.75 an hour, I think was the going rate at that point.
Well, as a 12-year-old, you were rich at that time. So, look, I started it in high school, and a lot of people, that's like their first jobs is in high school. Do you remember what it was like being around like adults at that time? Were they looking out for you, or were you seeing things like, whoa, this is adult talk over here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, I've had some good fortune and luck along the way, some really good mentors. And I'll tell you, I still remember the gentleman's name that taught me how to wash dishes, Bob Pansy. The dessert woman who's been there for 10, 15 years kind of took me under her shoulder or her wing and looked after. It was almost like family and kids to make sure that we were on a path. But at the end of the day, they respected us because we were working. And the owners of the restaurant, they all had everybody's back. So that type of structure, it felt like family, to be honest with you. And when you got out of line, they called you out on it, embarrassed you a little bit,
Yep.
but they, led with the carrot for the most part and put their arm around your shoulder, which is a really good thing. And I still remember it.
Very cool. Is it still operating, or has that been since closed down? Do you
You
remember,
know
or do you
what?
know?
It is still operating,
Oh, it's so cool.
Frederick, Maryland, believe it or not, absolutely.
What's it called?
It's called the Red Horse Restaurant. They had 2 of them, one in Frederick, Maryland, and the sister one was in Hagerstown, Maryland. And I believe it has only changed hands one time recently.
Wow.
But there's literally a red horse, the size of a horse out in front, real rustic, non-corporate, and I loved everything about it and what it stood for. So yeah, it's still there.
Well, shout out to the Red Horse Restaurant. You're gonna get some new followers out here. So you go to Penn State, like you mentioned. You do this through high school, so you're not like dreaming about getting into hospitality this time. You're going there for accounting, solid traditional job. Was that something your family pushed you to, or you were just good with numbers? How did that start taking shape?
No, yeah, it's interesting path. So my family history was actually healthcare and medicine. Both on my father's side, who was a surgeon, and as well as my mother. My
Wow.
both my sisters kind of followed that path. So I kicked it off trying to go pre-med. And I'll tell you, microbiology wasn't for me at all. Um, but I felt like, being a people person, I always looked at a glass half full, in everything that I did. But, accounting jumped out as me. I was always good at math. I was interested in transactions in business. And very early on, what accounting gave me exposure to is if you had accounting, you had finance, you had the economics and the marketing. You had to understand transactional based uh, how businesses work. And that was very intriguing to me at a young age. You understood inventories, you understood taxes, you understand the point of sale and how all of that kind of funneled up and how businesses were built. And the more I got into it, the more I was very interested. Um, and because I was interested, I was passionate about it. The other part was I did well at it, which
Yep.
was a good thing when you're in college and trying to balance the other social commitments that you have at that point in time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you went to Penn State, one of the most, we'll say, social schools out there, always on the top of the list. So you did bounce it. Were you doing any, like, fraternity life? Was there anything like that, or were you focused on school?
Yes, absolutely. I was part of Greek life, joined a fraternity called Alpha Sigma Phi, met a lot of good people, really that, worked hard, played hard, um, but built some really long lasting relationships that I have today. I also played club soccer up at Penn State,
Nice.
which was very, very fun. I was competitive on the sports side. But at the end of the day, I would say in the last couple of years, I took academics very, very seriously. Not to say that I wasn't involved in extracurricular activities, but no, it was a great balance. And I also enjoyed the tailgating, the football, the soccer, the wrestling, all sports at Penn State. Um, and I'll tell you, I attribute Penn State. It was a big school, um, and it forced your hand to make sure that you navigate and find where things are, you know, build those relationships, one side of campus to the other. And I credit Penn State. One thing they did on the recruiting front was they brought a lot of large companies in, whether it was accounting on the business side from New York, from Philadelphia, from Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., Chicago. And that was a big part on the accounting side where you had companies that you could meet and greet and ultimately interview with, which kind of opened the doors up to kind of that next phase of my career.
Yeah, it's amazing to see, especially if that college or university really believes in it, brings the alumni in. Those are the connections that I tell people to go after those because those people really want to see you succeed, especially if you're a go-getter. They're all looking for it. Is that what you're seeing when you go visit colleges now?
Exactly. Absolutely. Very competitive and you really have to take advantage when they are on premise. Just say hi, smile, breaking bread to the extent you can find that 5 or 10 minutes with them and make it personal. Some of the old school traditional ways of doing things, whether it's a handwritten card or, mailing snail mail really goes a long way, believe me. And taking advantage of that today is that little unique discriminator, worse the email or the text, which is also important. But, that's something that I did along with a lot of my colleagues, and I think it boded well for me.
Yeah, I think that's good. I have a stack of thank you cards I got for this year. That's one of my goals is to start sending out more thank you notes to people.
Sure.
So you got me remotivated here. It's been
Yeah.
staring at me. And Penn State, we got a fan. We got Kajana Carter, former football player, is a friend of ours. So we love Penn State down here in
That's
Miami.
fantastic.
So you graduate, you did pretty good because you get a job. It looks like right away over at Price Waterhouse Coopers, and start your career in accounting. Right?
I
Is that
did.
how it starts to transition?
Yeah, no, it was a great transition. PricewaterhouseCoopers, at the time, it was Coopers and Lybrand. They had just recently gone through the merger. And being from Maryland originally, I was looking at the greater Washington, D.C. area. But no, I started July 1st, 2020 in Baltimore, Maryland, which was a great PricewaterhouseCoopers office, a lot of different clients from middle market to banking. to mutual fund finance. So they had a good cross section of clients that was all over the stratosphere. In my first 2 years there as a new associate in the audit practice, um, I was on a number of accounts from H&S Bakery that made the buns for McDonald's. And as you go through the grocery store, a lot of different baked type goods, awesome client, very unique with different type of accounting, what I'll say challenges and
Yep.
certain transactions, um, to banking clients such as, All First Bank and Mercantile Bank shares that have since been consolidated and gobbled up. Um, but yeah, some really cool, mutual fund clients like Mason, had a number of mutual fund complexes, the BT Alex Brown and on and on. And then, healthcare clients, from Johns Hopkins to GBMC to MedStar. And I got to tell you, you had to adapt. You had to learn a lot of different things. You have clients that have different, pressure points and, getting that exposure, particularly in the mid Atlantic, really gave you an idea at that time with different options for you to transgress into, as you got closer to that senior associate or managerial level, what industry or discipline really piqued your interest because that ultimately is what you kind of had to refine. So, I had the benefit of seeing and working with a lot of really smart people in different disciplines within that audit world over the course of the first, few years. And what I really liked was the banking practice in capital markets. And I think a big part of it was, again, I just had great managers and partners that I aligned with in that area. And so, as I got that banking expertise, I kind of built upon it. Some of the clients that I had, you know, 3, 4, 5 years into my experience, really grew. One of my big clients that I was very proud of was the Federal Reserve System of the United States,
Okay.
multi key managers out of Baltimore and the greater DC area. Um, and worked on that, Mercantile Bank shares that has since been acquired by PNC Bank, was one of my clients and several others. And, I really enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, it was about people I worked with, a lot of dynamic partners, great leaderships, and a great, great culture with PricewaterhouseCoopers that treated their employees well. And I learned a lot, which ultimately led to an opportunity in, I guess it was
Yeah.
about year 7 or 8, into their national office, up in New York, or really northern New Jersey in their SEC services practice. And, very humbled and had the opportunity to do a rotation, up there, which was going to be a 2-year rotation, get me onto that partner track. And, it fell short in about the first year and a half up there, Steve. Um, and it took a turn to the better, if you will,
Yep. I've
which led to a whole nother world for me.
Yes, that's what I wanna get to, but I wanna walk this back because 'cause you're there for 8 years, you're climbing this track where you have this career, is working with some great clients, you're working with the government, you like you said, you could go up into becoming a partner, but then you make a big change and maybe a dream job for a lot of people. You join the NFL, and you are now part of the Washington Commanders as their CFO. How does that happen? Because that seems like a very crazy jump to a lot of people to see that go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it kind of goes back to establishing relationships, always keeping those bridges open and always communicating. Um, but yeah, to get back to your question, one of my colleagues at PricewaterhouseCoopers who had previously left PricewaterhouseCoopers went to a private equity company, um, a few years before I had left PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And he called me out of the blue when I was up in New York, still working with PwC, and said, "Hey, Nico, I think there's an opportunity that you would really find fascinating, back in, Northern Virginia, the Washington, D.C. area. And I said, I'm on a track. I love PWC.
Yep.
He said, so really, I think this is one that you'd be interested in. And I said, all right. His name was Chris. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, uh, it's with at the time, it's with the Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. And they're looking at, potentially somebody supporting a variety of different, responsibilities there, as well as some other pieces under the, really, I guess, portfolio, if you will, with Daniel Snyder. And I said, look, I'm, I'm open ears, very excited. I grew up, I was a diehard,
Yeah.
Eagle fan. And, yeah, Steve, I listened about it. At the time, I think I was about 28, 29 years old. I came down to interview, with what I'll call maybe some of the upper brass of the organization. And, after a series of interviews, I got an offer, come down, and it was just too good to be true. And I took that opportunity. Um, while I say I departed PricewaterhouseCoopers, um, it, it was all on such great terms. I think everybody there was
Yeah.
done well.
Wow.
Couldn't believe they were happy for me. And yeah, started with, the Washington Commanders in, 2008. Uh, and it kind of set the path to a very, very dynamic industry within the NFL, within the Washington Commanders, regime. And yeah, just a different world from auditing to very fast paced, altogether.
Yeah. So it's amazing because you're young. We said right off the bat, right? I was doing my math. They said 29, 30 at the most at the time. Getting this job and growing up a fan, it's got to be amazing. We could talk football all the time, but this is really an entertainment company. It's a hospitality company. You have all different kind of things you have to go do. Was it steep learning curve, or was it like, all right, I learned enough at Price Waterhouse to figure it out, and they gave me some leg room to like work my way, or was it like get this done now and let's go?
The answer is yes, yes, and yes. Here's what I would tell you. I think, from a work ethic perspective and what I learned at PricewaterhouseCoopers about, ethics and work ethic and, adapting, those characteristics always followed me. You build thick skin, but you dive right in. But yes, the learning curve was steep. And you hit the nail right on the head. NFL teams with only 32, but at the end of the day, it's almost like a major marketing company and hospitality company that happens to have a football team. And that's very important. Don't get me wrong, but between concessions in retail, in entertainment, and avid customer bases and season ticket holders, you have high demands and value propositions that you have to deliver on on top of really the financial backbone in my capacity of CFO on, to, equip and make sure that the business is, running well. And yeah, I just, I was fortunate enough, to get into a lot of facets of hospitality in my capacity as CFO, across the board. Television right deals really were at the NFL level, but you really had to understand, what that meant to the consumer, and everything that comes along with it on the financial side.
That's amazing. So I'm curious, and like I said, we won't talk about the football part, but like the business part. Just like a hotel, you understand what your capture rates are going to be, how many guest rooms you're going to be selling. Is that similar to like, all right, we know how many seats we have, we know how many of these outlets we need to staff. Is it similar
Yeah.
ish? Yep.
Very, very similar. There's a manifest. There's only so many seats. Go out to your season ticket base. You capture them. You have renewals, kind of like hotels and hospitality. It's like loyalty programs, whether it be with, a Hilton, a Marriott, a Hyatt, and so on and so on. Um, and they're loyal through thick and thin. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have price points, for season tickets. That's like your ADR, your average daily rate,
Yep.
and so on. And so, yeah, it is hospitality. And then when you start supplementing that with food and beverage. You have concessions, but you have catering,
Mhm.
very similar to
Events.
hotels
Mhm.
and other businesses in the hospitality space, national state parks. And you got to have good price points on all your menu offerings. You have to mix up. What is that menu offering, for the traditional demographic of the burger, the French fries, the hot dog? You're always going to have demand for that. But you got to be ahead of the curve on other menu offerings, whether, of course, in Maryland, it's the crab
Yep.
cheese pretzel, to accommodate that Maryland base, we're crabbies. Um, and then the brands, that's also important. People have resonated brands at the time. We had Johnny Rockets in the stadium, certainly have Phillips that was a little bit more of a local regional type brand, but you have to use different brand names for people that, trust in the value proposition on that. Different types of beers, craft beers,
Everything
all of that.
everything
So
coming through. So when people are coming to you, is it, like hotel world, we understand, like, here's our especially in big companies, here's your budget, here's your checkbook for the year and by month and by week. This is what you can spend, right? So I'm sure you had all the managers doing those, but were you involved in the operations where like, hey, the GM's coming to you like, do we have enough money to sign people? Or is that's a whole different part of the business?
yeah, that's a bit of a different part of the business. At the end of the day, the GM manage all the player personnel, the cap, and what that means. From my perspective, it was what what is the level of cash, the amount of dollars and cents
Mhm.
that we have.
To
But
use.
with respect to where that goes, yeah, that's where,
Saying, Nico, we have this
the
coming
right
through. We
line.
have enough sweet sold to make sure we cover this, right?
In essence, I guess you could say that.
So
Yep.
you're doing that. You're doing there, 4.5 years. I'm sure like every day's got to be fun. I'm sure it's hard too, but you've got this unique job that not many people get to hold. What happens? How does this change start to happen for you where you change out of that and go into the true world of hotels?
Yeah. I guess this goes back to the path, an interesting path for me. 4.5 years in, a lot of different things in the NFL. I always came back to, I wanted to make a real impact and a tangible impact with a company, um, and grow where I potentially could either, whether it be having equity or be a CEO, for a product in the NFL, in the Commanders gave me a lot of those tools. And I'll tell you, Steve, as the fates would align, my story is very unique. I was out playing golf on a fateful Sunday afternoon with my father-in-law. It was one of my few days off.
Yep.
And we got paired up with two gentlemen, a guy named Jerry and Barry. Never forget those names. They
Harry and
all
Bear.
kind of laughed. Jerry and Barry. And on the second hole, Jerry asked me what I did. And I said, well, I'm CFO of the Washington Redskins. And he had this twinkle in his eyes and he said, I used to be the CFO for the Washington Redskins. I said, come on. And I said, well, what years were you there? Well, he worked under Jack Kent Cook and Edward Bennett Williams. And I said, well, obviously I worked for Dan Snyder. So for the next 2.5, 3 hours, I learned a little bit about the company that he worked for, which was called Guest Service. And it happened to be that the guy he was playing with was the chairman of the board of Guest Servicing. So unbeknownst to me, it turned out to be a unsolicited 3.5 hour interview. And unbeknownst to him and to me, but at the time they were, Jerry was the CEO. They were looking for um, a CFO because a gentleman who was moving into the COO role had opened up a spot. And, look, I had my blinders on. I just, I was like, yeah, look, I might have some contacts in my network. And my father-in-law gave me an elbow into my rib and said, you want to throw your hat in the ring. And I spent the last 3 hours learning about how wonderful this company was in the hospitality market, which really went back to my grassroots of 12 years old and doing something tangible and really the history around this company with hotels and national parks and lodging and on and on. And, after that fateful day, 2.5, 3 months later, I got an offer.
That's
And
amazing. All from going golfing on a Sunday afternoon. No football that day.
correct. That is correct.
And he had the same job as you, which is even crazier because there's so few of you that have ever had that job in the NFL, in the world.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you get this. Was it a tough decision to make, or was it one of those like, "Yeah, I'm ready to move on. I like Jerry and Barry. I like what they're telling me."
Yeah. Again, I had the good fortune of being around both of them for 3 hours, you know, and I'll tell you, on a golf course when nobody really knew what would come out of it, you really understand the culture and the true character. So the decision, it was easy. Um, and learning a little bit about guest services, 100-year-old company,
Yeah.
that
1917, right? One of the oldest in the
Right.
country.
Exactly. Very unique, not a public company, but the culture of, what they built their foundation on. It was a company not looking to have a growth curve like a hockey stick, long-term partnerships, um, very steady. But the key that really resonated with me is that I could bring value to the company and contributions and knowing, look, there are analysts breathing down your neck. It wasn't that type of entity, that we could just really build upon that and do something special, in the hotel space, in the lodging space, and very diverse. Food and beverage, contract food services, tennis, recreation, marinas, and kind of going back like from my audit days, different clientele, you know, it just was, there was this kind of common denominator, which was visitor services, elevating that guest experience, doing it the right way, and fulfilling it was very, very intriguing to me.
And when you got there, right, they must say, "Oh, look at this guy. He came from the Redskins. He's an accountant guy. He's not a hospitality guy." Did you face any kind of pushback from some of a lot of leaders in the companies in hospitality are alpha people. They want to push back. You get any of that, or were you like pretty chill at the start?
Well, I probably got a little bit of people kind of feeling me out.
Yeah.
Um, but I think again, learning from maybe going to Penn State and being around people, I knew right away I could read my audience. Um, and while accounting was very strong and I was conservative, I also understood risk tolerance where from an operations perspective, and I think that's for the NFL and the Washington Commanders gave me that balance where it was, hey, look, there are business opportunities and take that risk. Whether it was special events and getting college football games in the FedEx field and helping drive that, the hospitality space. Um, I felt like I could talk the talk and I had some of the street cred of being in the trenches and war stories of true operations, which makes hospitality so great. When I hear stories about, individuals that started in the back of the house or a front desk or night auditor and worked their way up to being an assistant GM to general manager, there's no doubt, unequivocally, you don't have to go to business school to be a leader. That is the best business school where you work yourself through that rank and file and ultimately work yourself up into a district manager role at an RDO and ultimately potential leader. So I respect that. And I feel I had a lot of those tenets, if you will, through kind of my story, which is very similar to those truly, truly that came up through the hospitality space.
I love that. I can feel the passion already when you're talking. So I could see that you had it when you started. You're doing that CFO role for 7.5 years. You're doing a great job with it because the company seems to continue to grow and do well. How do you start to transition that? Because it's very different to be CFO than to get in operations. Was it letting it be known, like, hey, this is my plan. If I join you guys, I want to be a CEO? Or was it something that just kind of naturally evolved because you started drifting that way?
Yeah, I think it was the latter, Steve. I think, as I built very strong relationships with the existing executive leadership, um, but I went on site. We have about 250 to 300 contracts, all domestic. I traveled, I shook hands, I met with our utility workers back in the house, and I wanted to learn from them. Never stop learning. And when I brought that back, there's maybe as you ingrain yourselves out into the field, it naturally allows people to gravitate towards you. I always had an open door policy, and that was within kind of our existing group of employees. And, at the time we had about 4,000 employees. But from the executive leadership perspective, there was what I'll say, some pretty big transactions that, again, I had good fortune, that I felt like, I executed within our team very, very well. We were able to buy, a lodge and spa at Breckenridge out of the Lehman Trust in the first couple of years. When I came to guest services, that have been a great success ever since that. Um, there was another acquisition that we had, on the recreation side that I was intricately involved in, but it wasn't just transactional based. We had to store that to build upon it. And some of those large scale projects, as well as some hoteling, where we had some minority equity, relationships that we built upon, a Fairfield down in, Richmond, and some other property improvement plans that we executed. All of that in total, I think, kind of, set myself up well, take that next step, becoming chief operating officer. And really, at that point is when I was very excited that I could really not change, but elevate and build upon the direction of our 107-year history.
Yeah, and you came in at a challenging time, right? Because you started, everything's normal. You go through where the world shuts down, and that's a challenge for everybody. Were you finding yourself leaning back on your kind of finance experience, kind of managing costs and all that kind of stuff in the emergency situation, or were you letting your CFO do that and you leaning into making sure your teams were okay?
Yeah. It was, you know what? It was always collective. Whether it was a COO, CEO, or director of corporate compliance, I got to be honest with you, it didn't matter what the title was. It is just a title. There is importance to it. But we were always a team. And that kind of is attributable to our company and the culture. But you're right. I'll tell you, 2020, most challenging time, not just for us, but the industry as a whole. Um, Having finance and understanding, yeah, the nuts and bolts of, being a fiduciary and being prudent definitely came into play.
Yep.
And between the health crisis, adjusting quickly, but taking care of our employees during that difficult time, and then pivoting to organically grow under those adjustments in the recreation space, pushing stuff outside. It was a whirlwind. And no doubt about it, one of the most dynamic but rewarding, albeit challenging times. And now that we're on the other end of it, I couldn't be more proud of our team, our company, and finding new talent out in the marketplace with some young professionals where I got to tell you, the cream rises to the top in every facet and position. And it's been awesome. Admittingly, during that tough time.
Yeah, it seemed like you were perfectly positioned because of your history in national parks and being outdoors, because everyone was going to those locations during that time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, because of our diversity and having that long history, um, Steve, our recreation business and our marinas and our kayak, our boat houses, mountain biking, everything outdoors, we had banner years when our contract food service division really was challenged. The building populations, were maybe a tenth of what they were. They've since gotten much, much better, but that diversification as a company, it was awesome. But yeah, our national parks and really that grassroots, travelers that now said, hey, instead of going overseas or, staying indoor at certain resorts, everybody wanted to be outside and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So we really had to, you know, pivot and adjust and find ways to do things smarter because then the labor market was very challenged. But yeah, we're still reaping the benefit of it for sure.
I love that. I wanna get back to that, but I wanna continue on your piece because I saw that being here on South Beach as an executive at a hotel. Everybody wanted to be on the beach, and it was just, like, overwhelming because you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you do a great job because you've always done it. You've shown you've done a great job your entire career, and you finally get to the top of this company as CEO. How does that take shape? Because that's a big jump for anybody to go when you're operating, you're still not the number 1, even though you may act like it. How does that feel once you get to that position?
It's a I'll tell you, it's a bit scary, no doubt about it, but, it's what you train for, um, and, you never lose tenet or perspective of all the things that you learn to get there. Number 1, integrity is the most important piece of being a leader. No doubt, there's no compromise. Number one, and in work ethic and being attentive to all of your workers. And I say, if you had to characterize my situation, being a player's coach, that would be my style. And I was very confident that, the perspective, I'm not going to let you down, and I don't lose sight of it. Humble by nature, but I'm also, persevere, and I work very, very hard. And I would say after the first, 6 months, uh, you feel good about it, but, you also, it's a little bit lonelier at the top, and you have to listen to your resources, your board of directors, your mentors, and keep an open mind. So that transition, while, well, you kind of accept it and realize, hey, I'm at the top. It's a little bit lonelier.
Mhm.
I got a lot of smart people, and I brought a team in that I feel so comfortable with that it could be okay. And now it is fun, and we can make the right decisions. Not to say that, all those decisions, you're not going to bat 1,000 every time. You're still going to fail, but you learn from those mistakes, and, how do you adjust it, to capitalize on it going forward? So, um, I was very, very lucky to have a good predecessor who was the CEO 20 years to my, prior to getting into, to getting the CEO role. I still talk to him very frequently. And I still talk to all my, mentors from PricewaterhouseCoopers, some with the NFL to this day, leaders who I've grown up with, and it feels good. So, I'm in the role now a little over 2 years, and I couldn't be prouder of really the team that I have around me, and I think that's what makes my role successful to this day.
I love hearing that, and you've got a team that really is doing special things. You've got a lot of fun projects coming up right now, and one that just opened up here, kind of in my backyard in the Everglades. So I want to kind of hit on that, and then talk about what you're creating now. But let's talk about that because the Everglades in my backyard. I've lived here my whole life, and I've only been a handful of times. Right? I hate to say that, and I want
Ye-
to go more. So what have you created out here?
Well, I'll tell you first and foremost, Steve, we got your reservation booked whenever you're ready to go. But yeah, I'll tell you, it's really, really intriguing and exciting. So Everglades National Park, um, at Flamingo is a National Park Service contract that, we're very humbled and privileged to be awarded in 2017. It's a 20-year contract. And essentially what this is to bring back to life lodging, 4,000 square foot restaurant on stilts. On the lodges, we have 24 lodges on stilts as well, Echo Tent Village, and a lot of other development improvements. That was a culmination of 5 years. And, it was challenging. Modular container buildings, um, during the pandemic through supply chain, but we had the grand opening in October, and it's incredible. We launched in uh, really the first 48 to 72 hours of opening up reservations. We had several $100,000 of just visitors that booked the lodges for this upcoming season.
Wow.
So we are absolutely ecstatic. We're open, and I couldn't be more excited. And this was a national park, um, that was closed for some time, going back 2 decades from the catastrophic hurricanes that really wiped out the visitor center and a lot of the marinas there. And it's now brought back to life. Uh, we credit the collaboration with National Park Service, leadership there, Guy Bradley Visitor Center. They completed about the same time that we brought the lodges and the restaurant back. And so it just worked so darn well. And like I said, with international visitors and everybody, particularly in the regional market, Miami, and it's just this intimate experience under the stars. It's different, and very, very unique where you can get a little bit of everything, Steve, from, like I said, the lodging, the interpretive boat course, the kayaking, the biking, to some of the best fishing in the world out on the Florida Bay. So we're really humbled to activate it. Or you probably are familiar with this. Uh, we've had a number of really good media reporters on
Yep.
site from the New York Times to National Geographic, the Boston Globe, that are on site. And we couldn't be more ecstatic,
Yeah.
over the next 20 years, keep it going.
Yeah, it looks like you hit a home run. You sold me today. So I'm gonna have to take you up on your offer to go check it out in person with the family. But this kind of transitions into what you're doing now because it seems like now more than ever, not just it's millennials, Gen Z, but everybody is looking for unique experiences. And you're starting to kind of hit on this. And so, what are you working on now that's going to continue this legacy of what you've already built?
Yes, no, we're so one of the big things that we released just couple weeks ago is a whole new brand called Adventures Unbound. Um, it essentially unites over 50 of our properties throughout the United States, really to build those personal connections for visitors, for really those unforgettable outdoor memories and experiences. Um, we launched our website and the platform to book uh, at so many of our treasured locations. And really throughout Florida, the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest, the Northeast, and we have a certain number of collections that are all a little bit different, but really, really cool and cutting edge from our Sunshine collection, which is really concentrated in Florida, to the Pacifico, to the Capitol collection, right here in Washington, D.C., the Cascadia out in Washington State, and so on. So, yeah, we are really thrilled to launch this. In fact, we've just had uh, a couple of our road shows. The first one launched in Chicago this past weekend in Denver. We have some out in LA and San Francisco upcoming that we're launching our the brand. So we have a lot of our stores and employees really getting the word out there. So couldn't be more excited. Uh, our website out there. It's for the general public. It's explore adventures unbound.com. So I encourage everybody on the podcast and Steve for yourself and your colleagues and check it out because it's really cutting edge. And it's going to be really, really cool for the benefit of guest services.
That's amazing. I'm excited to hear this because we've seen more and more people getting into this kind of outdoor unique experiences. Some are doing it really well and others not so well. I think we've dabbled with it with our company. We're looking to do something in the Redlands area, kind of integrating farming and outdoor experiences and a short-term rental. But you're doing it at a high level because you've had this history of this company, 1917. So much of this is built off of working outdoors. Do you think this trend will continue on, or is this a fad that people will fall off of?
I do think I think it's a trend that is necessary. Um, Not just for the visitor experiences, but, to highlight sustainability and the embracement of all of the great natural resources within our country. Um, it's ingrained into our business. I can speak for guest services. this is what we were founded on with our partners and our core competencies within our national parks that we operate in state parks. Uh, and I really do. I mean, I think it lends itself to the consumer to have the highest level of value and experiences when there's so much competition out there, Steve. As you know, you have lots of options with you're making your vacation, and what you want to bring back is, that was a really cool experience, whether it's for you and your significant other or your kids or your family or your sister or just by yourself. At the end of the day, you want to do something that's really unique and special that you can count on. And I think that is, looking forward with, you know, everything being so competitive on social media, people have choices. You really have to, discriminate yourself and how you elevate that type of hospitality. And we've done it through Adventures Unbound, and we think, we're doing the right thing here.
Well, listeners, if you're not driving, pause the show, go check out Adventures Unbound because I think you're going to love what you see on there. And I know just from hearing Nico's story, you know that he is treating his team right. So if they're being treated right, they're going to treat you right when they're staying. But Nico, I know you've spent a lot of time with us and you're a busy man. I got one last question for you. So if young Nico was joining you, out of the Red Horse restaurant today, and he wanted to join your team, what advice do you have for him starting in this industry?
Yeah. I think it's a few things, which I touched on today. Uh, work ethic, do everything 100%. I know it's very simple. Um, and the schooling and the education is very important and that's great. But at the end of the day, highest level of integrity, work hard 100% in all that you do. That is one. Number two, relationships. Always keep the bridges open throughout your career, through your schooling. Um, and that will pay you back in spades. People often talk about, hey, that person was lucky they landed this job. But I will tell you, good luck follows strong work ethic as well as strong relationships. And thirdly, look, listening is such a key virtue, you know, talking about your accolades and how good you may be it is important. I mean, that's credibility to open that door, but listening about other people's experiences is critical, humble why you do it. A lot of people are the smartest person in the room, and that's great, but it is often overlooked, and it does not go unrecognized from leaders and executives. Humbleness and humility in the hospitality space is a key virtue because consumers see it as well. And they know authenticity and sincerity very easily. And that's ultimately what makes consumers feel good. So I think those three, just based on my experience, if I was telling myself back when I was 12 years old, 16 years old, or 21, that will follow you through the path.
And that's a great advice. And gosh, I think just rewind that last 45 seconds, listeners, because he gave you a master class in what to do. So, Nicole, I appreciate you joining us today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and learning more about your company, and we'll definitely be checking it out soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it. And all the best to you and your endeavors as well.